and I think a lot of it came about probably right before I went into high school. I remember there was a kid named Don DeLeon who had moved here from Chicago, and it was the first time I'd ever heard about the Latin Kings. And he began to create this this Latin King culture, believing that there was a lot of, he would tell the stories about it. If you were alone and you were homeless as a child, the Latin Kings would take you in. And that's what they did for him, and he wanted to create that culture because he believed that there was that sort of despair amongst kids. And I never saw that sort of despair. I saw fun and breakdancing and playing football and so on, and going down to Sycamore Creek and that park and fishing, and I felt like we were like in the good old days, you know, like we would see in the movies. But their experience was completely different. And their experience coming from Chicago and from LA and from other parts of the country, when they came, their world experience was completely different than ours. And they still felt that trauma from before. And I mean, almost overnight, you had the Latin Kings and the Fantasmas and the Bloods and the Crips, and that led to a lot of violence, and it led to a lot of distribution of drugs, I think, in Poly and so on. And then you had Chief, I think was it Chief Wyndham, who was also basically drafted from, at that time I believe it was Mayor Barr, or it might have been Mayor Moncrief, that hired him from Los Angeles, because he said, hey, we have a drug culture here, and we have a gang problem here, and these gangs all came from your city. So they brought him here, and he created a different, I think that there was a real problem that needed to be dealt with, but I think it was a very violent and abusive way of dealing with it, because we were absolutely over-policed. But it was also the kind of place where it went from being a good community to everyone knew where all the dope houses were. And there were dope houses that lasted 20 years, and the Fort Worth police couldn't do anything to stop them. They were very sophisticated. And as someone that grew up in that time, it was, everyone knew where there were more dope houses than there were churches. And it was cocaine and methamphetamine and marijuana, and quite honestly, like, I knew a lot of people that was just the trade that they picked up. And you talk about education, that beautiful place that Poly was, it just wasn't doing enough. And we were losing kids in middle school. You know, in middle school they were already becoming drug members and gang members, drug culture, and it really it took a lot of kids. One of my cousins is spending a life in prison right now, because that Latin King culture that I don't even believe actually existed, or there was a need there, those people from other states taught him and told him, this is what you have to do to prove yourself, and it cost him his entire life.